Hello there, and welcome to part 3 of the 2021 New Zealand Grocery State of the Nation from Shopper Intelligence, giving you the ingredients that you need to put shoppers at the heart of your conversation so you can drive a path to growth and better relations with your trading partners. My name's David Shukri, and driving the shopper thought leadership in New Zealand is Country Manager Andrew Arnold. How are you tracking, Andrew?
Very good, David. How are you?
I'm very well indeed, so thank you for asking. Now, as we come to the end of another extraordinary year, you've probably experienced and experiencing a lot of change in your life. And the same applies to grocery shoppers. So it's never been more important than now to really understand their behavior so that you can influence the direction that your category is going in and take a lead in the market. So that is why we have broken this down into 3 parts and 3 big focus areas. In part 1, we covered value and trusted quality. As important as price is, there are other factors in the value equation that you need to be aware of today. Part 2 is all about the occasion mindset, how the mindset of the shopper today varies hugely depending on their intended occasion or mission, and what that shopper is demanding is a clue to how you need to retail to that need. Now, in part 3 of the series, we are heading into omnichannel grocery retailing, the latest buzzword, but what does it all mean? We're going to share a framework very soon and an approach to help you steer your way through to more effective category investment. So, without further ado, let's get stuck in, Andrew, and shine a light on omnichannel.
Oh, yes, omnichannel. So, yes, this very much is a buzzword for sure. But there is a little bit of difficulty in understanding exactly what this means, because it seems to mean different things depending on who you ask. And also the question that arises from this is that how do you action things? When someone says omnichannel, what do you actually do about it? So we're here to help. So look, there are 3 key steps to understand how to succeed in omnichannel. So you have to understand each of these steps. You have to measure each of these steps, and you have to invest in each of these steps. So the first piece is all around this pre-store trigger angle. We need to know how the shopper is influenced and by what. So in other words, we need to understand what the triggers are. So you will get triggered to buy in many different ways and mediums, but look, they all have one thing in common, don't they? They influence you to make a buying decision of some kind. So there's traditional ways of doing this. There is mailers, there's TV spots, there's ads, there's bus back, there's magazine, whatever it might be. Then there's also these newer ways of engaging through digital or real time. So there is actually a really good example of this in the real-time digital space. So Snickers have an algorithm that knows when you're hangry. And they do this by scanning your social media feeds. So what you're looking at, how you're responding to them, to all that kind of stuff. So they send you offers on Snickers at these times when they believe that you are in this hangry state so that you can redeem them. This is very much a type of strategy that isn't necessarily for everyone. It could come across as quite, public and aggressive, but it's a really good example of a modern day way to trigger somebody to buy. So that's the first part. It's all about the triggers. The second part is really about where you decide to buy. So this could be bricks. It could be clicks. It could be the same place that you were triggered, i.e. it could be in the online environment, or it could be something else entirely. So you could have browsed online for what you wanted and then gone to the physical store to buy, or you could have gone to the physical store, to put eyeballs on something, and then left the store, gone to the car park, sat in your car, and ordered it on your phone. It could be as simple or as complicated as the person's comfort level dictates, but essentially you make a decision as to where you're going to buy, and the triggers are a part of that process. So once you've decided where you're going to buy, then this is where the third step comes into play. And this is all about the category needs. This comes to the fore, and this could very well be different by bricks or clicks. And it will also obviously be different by the channel that we're talking about here, but we're talking about grocery, right? So, this is all about understanding the category needs that the shopper has in the category that they've decided to buy, and in the channel that they have decided to buy. You need to measure this process to understand how it's different by platform, how it's different by shopper, and how it's different by mission.
Suddenly got a strange hankering for a chocolate bar, Andrew. I don't know why. This is all very true, and in one respect, it's quite simple: right offer, right place, right time. But the challenge is that, as you just outlined, the path to purchase today isn't linear; it's dynamic. You can see something online and you end up buying it in store, or vice versa. So there are multiple paths that you as a supplier, that you as a retailer need to cater for.
Yeah, and at the same time, that path to purchase, it's continuous rather than being, a discrete period of time. It's not a certain amount of time. It's happening all the time. So you got to think about how people tended to shop maybe even just 5 years ago. But, even certainly if you went back even further than that, maybe 10 years or so or more, stock up, run down, stock up, run down. Top ups and convenience, that superseded this approach for a lot of shoppers already. But now as a retailer or a supplier, you have the means to be continuously engaging with your target audience, if they so choose to do so. And that means that your messaging has to be more tailored to their specific needs as they evolve through, a day or a week or a month, because otherwise you just become background noise. So you take that notion forward, you want to start with those initial triggers. So now we've got a pretty good understanding through our program about what the triggers are for bricks, shoppers, and grocery. But we're just starting to get an idea now in New Zealand of what this whole process looks like in e-commerce grocery. So now we're going to take a look at some of those key facets, in e-com. So first of all, we're going to look at the triggers. So the first thing that stands out here is that more shoppers plan in e-com than in bricks. In fact, significantly more. We have 78% of all shoppers in e-com in New Zealand plan to do what they're going to do versus 72% bricks and mortar. And more shoppers in that e-com environment, they rely on some kind of shopping list through either a saved list or saved favorites or something of that nature when they're doing their e-com shopping. So there is definitely something here about getting yourself onto that shopping list, because habit is definitely a big factor in planning, whether it's bricks or clicks, but even more so in clicks. But how shoppers are triggered to use e-com, that's a mixture of both digital and analog, old-fashioned cues. So the retailer site, that plays a really big role, and it should, if we're talking about e-com. And emails also play quite a big part too. But it's also worth noting these come at different times, at random times of the day, and when you actually notice them, can vary quite wildly. You could see one at 12:30 at night because you haven't actually gone to bed yet, but it's not really something you may consider doing at that particular time. There's also these more traditional methods like TV or radio or billboards, etc., and they can trigger people to buying online as well. Not so much at the same rate the site can or email can, but they do have this role to play. And in fact, Pack and Save and New World shoppers actually over-index on these more traditional methods. So we do have to also understand as well that the relatively short time that Pack and Save and New World have been in operation, that will be playing a role in that for sure. But it is definitely clear that the messages in a mailer or a TV advert can drive a shopper to just grab their laptop, open it up, and start placing an order. Step 2. So this is all about where they choose to shop. So this is all about, this is all about why do they choose clicks over bricks, or vice versa. So the convenience angle, so that's on the left-hand side there. That's definitely very big, all right? So being able to shop anytime definitely is related to that. The email at 12:30 at night, maybe you do want to actually do a full grocery shop at 12:30, at night. That's up to you if you wish to do that. But, that's definitely a big factor. The ability to spend less time doing so also speaks volumes. So, and that has implications in bricks as well. So maybe shopping physically is just too hard for some. Maybe there's a variety of things going on there. But also there's this belief, which is the fourth one down there, this belief that it's easier to manage a budget when you're shopping online because, you can't see your running total quite easily when you're doing an e-com order. I often try and guess how much I bought when I'm at the, physically at the store. And I'll be honest, I'm never right. I always think, oh, it's going to be this, and it turns out to be that. And it's like, how did that happen? So I definitely understand this ability to manage the budget angle. It's interesting as well that COVID is only the 5th highest reason that people pick to do shopping online. Now, this was done before the latest outbreak in August and all the rest of it. But having said that, this is still a good indicator as to how much this has changed mindsets. So even though we weren't in a lockdown situation when this survey was done, this really still does show that lots of people are still going to continue to have a concern about keeping themselves safe. Hence, they're going to stay with online shopping. When you also consider how bricks and clicks are different, which is on the right-hand side there, the biggest piece is about the mindset itself. Shopping for a specific mission appears to be the domain of bricks, while shopping to fill the pantry seems to be dominated by Ecom. There's also some demographic differences at play here. So household with kids, for example, the middle life stage, that hugely over-indexes on Ecom. Now, this age group is comfortable with tech, but it's not necessarily as immersed in it as much as millennials are. So that's a fairly interesting dynamic we see there. What this is really telling us is that clicks is currently viewed as a way to do your big weekly shop in a much more convenient manner than just jumping into the car. It's more so that than necessarily embracing this digital way of living, at least so far to this point. There's also something we probably should delve into here in terms of cross-channel loyalty. In other words, from clicks to bricks. So what's very clear from our study is that there's not a great deal of loyalty across these channels to a particular retailer. So what this means is that there's actually only a limited chance that the shoppers of a particular retailer will shop at both the physical and the online store of the retailer exclusively. It's far more likely to be the case that shoppers have a favorite physical store, that is actually a different banner to their e-commerce store of choice. So say, for example, you use countdown.co.nz, it's much more likely that you do not actually shop at the Countdown that is nearest to you, as well as shopping on countdown.co.nz. So that's actually quite a different scenario. And why you expect the South Island is where this probably would happen, because you've only got countdown.co.nz in the South Island really at the moment, at the time of recording. Even in the North Island, this still holds true. We've only got 38% of e-commerce grocery shoppers in the North Island shopping at the same banner for bricks and clicks, which means that over 60% don't.
That's fascinating in its own right. And I just wanted to share a couple of contrasts, if I may, Andrew, between New Zealand shoppers and Australian shoppers. The first one is actually on the previous slide, where you talked about the reasons for using online. And what we know here is that Australian shoppers are approaching online very, very differently. So they are much more inclined to use online and e-commerce for occasions, and in a more occasion-driven way, as well as for the bulkies. But we don't see that kind of bricks is the main trip, and online is a bulky trip in Australia. It's much more occasion driven. But on this point as well, we almost see the opposite of what you're speaking of here. Much higher levels of cross-channel loyalty on this side of the ditch. So the message here that we're sharing with suppliers and retailers is lock them in early now, because that loyalty is there to be won. But actually, your message and the message to a New Zealand audience is that it's a very different kettle of fish for you over there.
Yeah, it is. And that's the thing. So there's lots of implications from this, right? So the first, the biggest one, obviously, is that you can't just simply assume that what happens in Australia happens in New Zealand. That's the obvious one. But there's another obvious one too, is that, particularly if you're Countdown, for example, is that the shoppers who use your e-commerce site, they're not overly likely to be the same people who shop in your stores. So you can't treat the two channels the same. The strategy does need to be different. Suppliers will need to have a different strategy to effectively talk to shoppers in each channel, Ecom and bricks. You can't just pick up your Countdown in-store strategy and plop it onto countdown.co.nz and expect it to do the same thing, because they're probably not the same people. Those needs that they have, they are different.
Now, this is where I think things get really interesting. You've alluded to it, and we talk about it so often, Andrew, that shoppers are not a homogenous mass. So the ability to segment your target audience by gender or demographic, or in this case, by age group, this is what we see and we find sets the leaders and the influencers in the industry apart from the rest.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see that time and time again. It's all about applying that principle to whatever it is we're talking about. So if we apply that to the e-com environment, we start seeing very different needs arising. And so this is really now, this is all about step 3. This is about understanding the needs of the shoppers in your category, depending on what channel we're talking about. And in this case, it's about age group. So we're focused here on age group. There are plenty of other ways to skin the cat, as you've mentioned. But firstly, we've got our young shoppers, our 18 to 34-year-olds, our millennials. You know, for those of you who can remember back in the news a month or so ago, the North Shore influencers. You know, these are the ones who are the most engaged with the site. I know David doesn't know what I'm talking about, but I'm sure some of you watching out there know what I mean. These are the guys who are most engaged with the site. They're the ones who spend the most time on there. They're the ones who will click through the most things. They're the ones who will read the most product descriptions. They're the ones who are most likely to do something impulsive on the site, just to literally buy something because they like the look of what they've seen. They haven't possibly physically held the product ever in their lives, but they're willing to do something impulsive because they like the information that's there and they like the look of what is there. Then we start talking about the middle life stage, the 35 to 54-year-olds. So these are the ones we've already spoken about a wee bit anyway. These are the ones who are the biggest usage group. These are the ones who are likely to spend the most on the site. And because of that, or maybe even despite that, you know, depending on which way you look at it, they're actually the most price sensitive group out of the lot. So they're the ones who will know the price the best. They're the ones who will be doing the comparisons between Ecom and online, or between this Ecom site and that Ecom site. They're the ones who will be watching their running total the most. And they're also the ones who will be using the search function the most. Now, this is a bit scary because, you know, if they're the heaviest users of the search function, they're the ones who you really need to make sure the search makes sense, because overwhelmingly shoppers, and this is not just 35 to 54-year-olds, this is everybody, overwhelmingly shoppers do not sort their searches in grocery Ecom in New Zealand. So if you're not on the first search page of results, you won't get picked. No one is going to page 2 or page 3 or page 4. If you're not on that first page, maybe if you're not even on the first couple of lines that they can see, they won't select you. The older group, the 55 pluses, they've got the most ingrained habits on the site. They, put simply, they know what they want. And for them, price is not really a very strong consideration at all. What's most important to them, actually, interestingly enough, is order integrity. If they ordered it, they damn well better get it. Don't substitute something in there that I didn't want. That's their attitude. They know what they like, they want it, and they do not want anything else to turn up that they didn't order. So availability is very crucial in this age group, and the sanctity of the order is the be all and it's the end all. So if they're ordering from a particular site, they expect to get what they ordered, not something else. There's a couple of other factors I think we need to talk about here, because these do distinguish clicks from bricks. The first one here on the left-hand side there is that shoppers are significantly more likely to be open to the idea of paying more for something if they're given a reason to. So that's a significantly more likely compared to bricks and mortar. So there is a big group of shoppers, the 35 to 54-year-olds that we've already spoken about, who are watching their pennies, but that still doesn't mean you can't trade them up. You can still do that if you justify what you're doing. If you justify the reasons behind why this product costs more than that through product efficacy, through, you know, characteristics of the product, et cetera, et cetera. And in clicks, you know, the shopper is much more likely to be open to this idea than they are in bricks. So you need to be the pantry stocker for sure, but you've got to make sure those premium and the quality cues cut through effectively. Second, on the right-hand side, there's a significantly lower desire to buy private label in Ecom than there is in bricks and mortar, even though online is more likely to be a general stock up mission. So brands have an outsized role to play in Ecom. Private label has its place, but the shopper is thinking brand first in most cases. So clearly you need to make sure you come up on that first search page ahead of private label. So you got to make sure your keywords are lined up as good as they possibly can be, because you're at the mercy of that algorithm to a large extent. So make sure those linkages are strong, that everything is linked up the way it's supposed to be, that you're attached to that, to the categories you need to be attached to, that you're reflecting the missions that you need to be attached to, the occasions and the mindsets as well. You've got to be in those areas. They've got to be linked up. Otherwise, there's a chance you won't get looked at. So the thing here is that the channel is used for general stock up for sure, but there is definitely still a very strong level for premiumization at the individual category level. So it's all about focusing your investment where it's needed. And why is that? because there's actually still a lot of opportunity in this channel to improve. So broadly speaking, there's not really a great deal of difference in the level of satisfaction shoppers have in bricks or clicks. And there isn't really a great deal of difference in the retailer performance across bricks and clicks. And the big surprise here is that Countdown.co.nz has actually had a head start of roughly a decade or so, but these recent entrants, New World and Pack and Save, they've actually managed to carve out their own niche reasonably quickly and reasonably successfully too, to boot. So, but the big thing about this is though, is that the e-commerce environment, it can be improved. It needs to be improved. And it's not just about simply replicating what you're doing in bricks and mortar in the online environment.
Yeah, well, that's true for sure. And there's room for improvement, definitely, Andrew. But I think it's fair to say as well that some of the ingredients just haven't been available until now. And I'll give you for instance, from a poll that we ran recently in a webinar last week. It was that we held this one. 60% of the suppliers and retailers who were watching that session said the one thing they wanted more of was category-specific insights for e-com shoppers. Now, AU businesses are starting to get that now, and it won't be long before New Zealand businesses are going to need that too.
Yeah, that's definitely true, David, because if we just look at Countdown, for example, they have a challenge ahead of them. They need to rise to these advances that are being made by the foodstuffs brands in ecom. So, the supply community also has a challenge to ensure that these brick strategies are not just lifted up and plonked into e-commerce as a matter of default. So it's not exactly rocket science to say that the future is here, that it's here now. All the parties that are involved, they need to get to grips with what this channel actually needs to do to be successful. And that's a very significant part of what their omni-channel strategy needs to be.
Can you distill it all down for us, Andrew? There's some great takeouts, some great call outs. What's the distillation into 3 key points?
Well, absolutely. Firstly, look, this is all about considering the whole spectrum for omnichannel. So, this path to purchase, we spoke about that. It's not linear anymore. It's not discrete anymore. It's continuous. It's dynamic. You have to tailor your approach accordingly. You can't just expect to have a simple, discrete, linear strategy about how you talk to shoppers anymore. The second piece is all about the fact that bricks and clicks, there are different missions. Occasion and top-up shopping seems to be what bricks is used for, more so than what online is used for. Bulk buying and pantry stocking is a much stronger mission in clicks. So again, they're doing different things. So you need to make sure the strategy is different. So that's why the third point is really the most important, I think, out of all of this, is that you can't just simply pick up your strategy that you use in bricks and mortar and just drop it into clicks and expect it to do what shoppers in online want it to do. The shopper isn't the same. Their needs are different. So you need to have a different strategy for online, for bricks and mortar.
Wonderful. 3 key things to take away there. And that wraps up part 3 of the 2021 New Zealand State of the Nation video series. If you're interested in how you can define value in your category, make sure you take a look at part 1 of this series. And if you're keen to know more about how occasion-based shopping is impacting behavior, then head along to part 2. And of course, if you have any questions at all about how you can find growth by putting shoppers at the heart of your conversation, then just reach out to Andrew and he'll be happy to help.